Good Monday morning to you. I was watering the yard the other day. I've been trying to grow grass because my front yard was a mud pit. So I planted some grass seed and I've been just like working super hard to kind of get it growing. And one day as I was out in the front yard watering, every time I tried to like turn to water a different part of the yard, the wind, just this Kansas Midwest wind, just blew right in my face. And I could just like feel it like pushing the water back on me and like keeping the stream from going like a long ways to like this little stream of water. And it was super frustrating. And I found myself at one point finally stop and almost just in frustration say like, what in the world? Like, what's going on? It felt super personal. And I realized in that moment that I was taking the weather personally, right? Have you been there? Have you ever taken the weather to heart as if it was aimed at you specifically? Oh, of course it would rain on the day when I wanted to blah, 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 right? Our words reveal what we think. Our words reveal how we see the universe, whatever that might be. And sometimes we catch ourselves with kind of a surprising reality of some silly beliefs we have, as if the whole universe, the weather patterns revolved around ruining your day, right? Ruining my day. Completely ridiculous. And yet we often believe those things, don't we? Words reveal our thinking. I lived in Japan for a year, and one of the most interesting things for me, at least, was really truly being exposed to another culture, another language for the first time beyond just simple dialogue in a restaurant or something like that, or a TV show with a different language now and then. This was fascinating because what I realized was that our words really truly do reveal how we see things so differently. I was talking to some of my friends there in Japan, and somehow the topic of seaweed came up. And just that term just made them laugh. Like, why do you Americans call it seaweed? We don't eat weeds in Japan. You don't eat weeds in America. Why would you call it seaweed? And I asked them what they would want to call it. The Japanese word is nori. They have a couple different words for it, but nori is the kind that you eat usually. And it doesn't mean seaweed. It means something else, right? It's talking about the same plant though. And they said, well, we'd like to call it sea vegetable maybe because it's very good for you. It's delicious, it's nutritious, part of a balanced breakfast, right? Like cereal is in America. But the fact that we call it a weed, the fact that they would say, well, it's a vegetable, reveal that we see things very differently. But the thing is, the power of words doesn't just reveal how we see the world. The power of our words very much shapes our world around us, doesn't it? It shapes reality. It shapes our life. Have you ever been in a traffic jam or in some traffic and suddenly you start to get really mad about it as you start to tell yourself, this is frustrating, I'm going to be late, and you talk yourself almost into this frustration, whereas another person in the same car on the same schedule can be completely relaxed because they're telling themselves something differently. You're living in different realities, different universes in the same car. Words shape our reality. And that's one of the reasons that I believe the Bible is so obsessed with our words, what we say, the way that we speak about things. I mean, we all know how negative the Bible is on gossip, and yet we still struggle with that, don't we? We're not supposed to gossip about people. The Bible uses the term backbiting, which is like more than just gossiping. It's very much spreading negative information about someone to hurt them. The Old Testament prohibition against a false witness is not just about lying. It's using your words to attempt to get someone convicted for a crime that they didn't even necessarily do. The Bible is very, very strict on how we as followers of God should use our mouths, how we should speak, because our words change the world around us. You know, you think about weeds again and about vegetables. The things that we call weeds in America, we just automatically avoid. And one of those things that at least I grew up calling a weed was a dandelion. And a lot of you might know this, but dandelions are super, super nutritious. They're full of really good nutrients. They're good for you. They're a bit bitter for what a lot of us Americans are used to eating, but you can mix them into salads. You can cook with them a certain way to make them less bitter. They're super good for you. There's literally nothing wrong with them. They're not a weed in the sense that they're not meant to be eaten. I believe God created them to be eaten. Doesn't mean you have to, but we call them weeds. Is it possible that there are other things in our life that we are avoiding because we're calling them the wrong things? Is it possible that we're calling things negative terms, that we're defining things negatively and missing out on the benefit that they actually have for us in our life? That we're avoiding things that we would call a weed, when in reality they're very, very good for us. What about failure? When you go through a situation that doesn't work out the way you want, or doesn't quite work out perfectly the way you want, and you say, oh, I failed at that, I'm going to stop, right? We deem something failure, and that affects how we view it, doesn't it? We give up. Oh, I'm not any good at that. I failed at that. I messed up. I'm not made for that kind of thing. And yet, failure is not final. As many people have said throughout the ages, failure is simply an opportunity to learn. You will never learn as much from failure, or you will never learn as much from success as you will learn from failure. And we cheat ourselves from the opportunity to learn from failure when we call it failure rather than an opportunity to learn. What is it? Is it possible that we're taking things personal that have nothing to do with us? I can't believe that this thing happened to my family. Well, it happens to every family. I can't believe I got sick. Well, everyone gets sick. I can't believe this, blah, 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 the weather. Is it possible we're taking things personal that are not personal at all and causing ourselves more grief? Is it possible that we're defining life by our limits, that we're speaking those limits rather than speaking about the opportunities we have, as limited as they might be? How are we speaking about that? Is it possible that we're just reacting to the world around us rather than being proactive and using the freedom we have? If someone's unkind to me, I do not have to act in the same way in return, as much as I might feel like I have to. The Bible says I have freedom to choose how I respond. The way we speak about it affects the way we live it, the way we experience it. There's a story about General Robert E. Lee and General Grant in the Civil War. General Robert E. Lee was just pretty much an enigma. Nobody knew how to conquer him on the battlefield. And people started to believe he almost had supernatural powers. And people were terrified to meet this guy on the battlefield. He just beat everybody. He'd have half the army, split that in half, and beat you still. It was just unbelievable. And yet when Grant came along, everything changed. And one of the reasons that changed was one day, the first battle that Grant fought General Lee directly, the battle was going poorly, as usual, and all of General Grant's generals were running up to him and said, well, General Lee's going to do that. We're afraid he's going to do this. We're afraid he's going to do that. And at one moment, General Grant, Ulysses S. Grant, stopped and said, stop, stop, stop. And he said, I am sick and tired of hearing about what Robert E. Lee is going to do to us. All you guys just shut your mouths and go back to your posts. I want you to start talking about what we're going to do to him. Less than a year later, General Grant conquered General Lee. It was over. The way we speak about life affects the way that we live life. Proverbs 15:4 says that there are two kinds of tongues, two kinds of words, two kinds of speakers. He says one kind of mouth, one kind of tongue brings healing like the tree of life, that it speaks life and it brings life. He says the other tongue crushes the spirit. What kind of tongue do you have today, this morning, this evening? Is your tongue bringing life to the people around you? Is your tongue crushing the spirits of people around you? And even in your own life, how are you speaking to yourself? How are you speaking about your own life? There's a song lyric I love. It said, be careful what you say because you might be listening. Are you speaking life over yourself? Are you bringing healing to yourself with the way you speak to yourself? Or are you speaking in a way that crushes your own spirit? I want to challenge you today to take a moment to think about how you're speaking with your words and with your words in your mind. How are you speaking about the people around you? How are you speaking about your life? How are you speaking about yourself? And I want to challenge you to take a moment, take a deep breath, ask God, pray a little prayer, and decide that you're going to be the kind of speaker that brings life like the tree of life, that brings healing like the tree of life, and that you're not going to crush the spirits of the people around you, including your own. Be kind, be compassionate, be brave and courageous. Speak in a way that brings life.